Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Tuesday, 15th July, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China's economy demonstrated resilience, expanding by 5.2% in the second quarter, surpassing expectations and bolstering confidence in achieving the year's official 5% growth target, despite ongoing U.S. tariffs and a global economic slowdown. This growth, although slightly below the first quarter's 5.4%, is largely credited to government stimulus measures and exporters, accelerating shipments in anticipation of new tariffs. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang revealed that the company secured approval from the Trump administration to sell advanced H20 AI chips to China, effectively reversing previous export restrictions, with the U.S. reportedly considering these sales as part of rare earths negotiations. China has introduced new export controls on core technologies used in lithium battery production, a strategic move to safeguard its dominant position in the global electric vehicle supply chain. Meanwhile, Douyin, the Chinese version of TikTok, is aggressively venturing into China's online travel market, employing hotel discounts and subsidies to capture market share. President Xi Jinping stressed China's dedication to free trade, opposing unilateral sanctions and trade barriers during the opening of a supply chain expo by. China has also rolled out a national cyber ID system, sparking privacy and censorship concerns, designed to protect citizens' identity information through an encrypted virtual ID. President Xi Jinping noted the turnaround in relations with Australia during Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's visit to Beijing, advocating for equal treatment and mutual benefit. Turning to India, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar emphasized at a CO meeting in China that the organization must remain firm against terrorism, citing the Pahalgam attack as an example of attempts to incite religious division. Across the Pacific in the United States, Taiwanese leader William Lai Ching-te is planning a U.S. stopover that's set to anger Beijing. Meanwhile, in the European Union, the EU is pressing China on its relationship with Russia ahead of the China-European Union summit in Beijing, accusing China of aiding Russia's war efforts in Ukraine while seeking fairer economic relations. Shifting to the United Kingdom, Jing Sudong, a former top engineer at Shell and adjunct professor at Imperial College London, has left Britain to work at a Chinese university, leading a team focusing on low-carbon technology for the petroleum industry. Russia's ongoing conflict in Ukraine remains a focal point, as President Vladimir Putin insists on continued fighting until the West agrees to peace talks under his conditions. Russia claims to have neutralized 55 Ukrainian drones, resulting in casualties, while a U.S. citizen, Daniel Martindale, who allegedly supported Russia from within Ukraine, received a Russian passport from Putin. Furthermore, Russia, along with Iran and China, is reportedly escalating hostile activities in the UK, allegedly using criminals and children as proxies. With increased tariffs and regulatory hurdles impacting exports to the US, Chinese sellers are increasingly targeting Russia's expanding e-commerce sector. Ukraine continues to resist Russian advances, launching airstrikes on Russian military assets such as the Lipetsk air base. The nation is poised to receive continued weapon supplies as part of ongoing support from the United States. The United States, under President Donald Trump, is taking a stronger stance against Russia, acknowledging an adversarial relationship. Trump has committed to ongoing arms shipments to Ukraine, affirming its right to defend itself. Furthermore, he has threatened 100% tariffs on Russia and nations dealing with it if a Russia-Ukraine peace accord isn't reached within 50 days, warning buyers of Russian exports that they could face sanctions unless Russia agrees to a peace deal. the European Union is facing internal discord regarding sanctions against Russia. Slovakia has blocked an EU proposal to impose new sanctions, specifically a ban on Russian gas imports by 2028. The EU's foreign policy chief has indicated that the matter is now contingent on Slovakia's stance. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot hopes that alignment with US and EU sanctions will compel Putin to acknowledge the realities of the conflict in Ukraine. China's President Xi Jinping has vowed increased support for Russia, aiming to unite nations of the Global South and promote a fairer international framework. Chinese sellers are increasingly pivoting to the Russian e-commerce market in response to escalating tariffs and regulatory uncertainty in the United States. China is also allegedly involved, alongside Russia and Iran, in escalating hostile operations within the UK. Ukraine is awaiting specifics on billions of dollars worth of promised weaponry from the United States, potentially including Patriot and Tomahawk missiles, though an agreement remains pending. Finally, despite Kyiv's urgent need for U.S. weaponry to defend against Russian air attacks, President Donald Trump is downplaying expectations of long-range missile provision to Ukraine, stating the U.S. is not looking to supply weapons for strikes deep into Russia. The Pentagon and U.S. military officials in Europe are working with NATO allies to expedite the shipment of Patriot missile systems and release previously delayed munitions to Ukraine. Amid battlefield setbacks and a decline in national morale, Ukraine's prime minister resigned, and President Volodymyr Zelenskyy intends to nominate Deputy Prime Minister and Economy Minister Yulia Svyridenko as the new prime minister. Turning to the United States, President Donald Trump has warned Russia, threatening substantial tariffs if the conflict in Ukraine isn't resolved within 50 days. Many Republicans have shifted their position to support aid to Ukraine against Russian aggression, reversing years of advocating for its termination. Meanwhile, Russia faces continued pressure as the European Union has been unable to agree on an 18th round of sanctions. In the United Kingdom, the government launched a secret operation to relocate thousands of Afghans who worked with British forces after a data breach risked exposing their identities. Australia's Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, traveled to Beijing for discussions with Chinese President Xi Jinping, aiming to strengthen the relationship between the two nations. Although disagreements persist on contentious matters, such as the port of Darwin's ownership and concerns about Taiwan, Albanese voiced apprehension to Xi regarding a Chinese naval exercise involving live fire conducted near Australia, emphasized that geopolitical instability and the trade conflict initiated by Donald Trump should not disrupt the stability of China and Australia. He also expressed China's readiness to enhance bilateral relations. Federal Education Minister Jason Clare is pushing for a national database containing the employment records of childcare workers, prompted by accusations against Joshua Dale Brown, who was employed at more than 20 childcare facilities. The federal government is postponing its response to Gillian Siegel's proposal for tackling anti-Semitism on university campuses, pending a more comprehensive review of racism in universities and a report from the Islamophobia envoy. Clare affirmed his commitment to addressing racism in all its forms. In Melbourne, strong winds led to the crash of 427 drones into the Yarra River during a Women's World Cup light show, as wind conditions surpassed the drone's operational limits shortly after their launch, causing collisions and failures. Bradley John Murdoch, known as the Outback Killer, convicted of the 2001 murder of British backpacker Peter Falconio, has died at the age of 67. Falconio's remains have never been located. Indonesia recently finalized a trade agreement with the United States. The deal includes a 19% tariff on Indonesian goods Entering the U.S., Indonesia is set to purchase $15 billion in U.S. energy products as part of the agreement. They will also buy $4.50 billion in agricultural goods and 50 Boeing jets. In other news, Indonesian authorities apprehended 12 individuals. These individuals are suspected of trafficking babies to Singapore for adoption. They are accused of sending over a dozen babies. Rescue efforts are ongoing for 11 people, including 3 children. They went missing after a speedboat capsized in a storm near the Mentawai Islands. Furthermore, a study has urged Indonesia to improve its oversight of Chinese-funded infrastructure projects. The study recommends measures to ensure long-term public benefit and guard against debt risks. It also emphasizes environmental harm reduction and transparency. Turning to United States-China trade relations, Treasury Department Chief Bessent has signaled flexibility. This flexibility concerns the timeline for a final trade deal with China. Israel has conducted bombing raids in Syria and Lebanon, targeting Syrian government forces in southern Syria after sectarian clashes, and Hezbollah positions in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, including a Syrian refugee camp. Israel cited the protection of the Druze community as justification for its actions. In Gaza, health officials reported over 90 Palestinian deaths from Israeli strikes overnight and into the following day, impacting multiple families. The United Nations reported a doubling of malnutrition rates in Gaza, attributing the increase in hunger among Gaza's over 2 million Palestinians to the broken ceasefire in March and the ban on food and supplies entering Gaza. Francesca Albanese, the UN rapporteur, has called for international intervention to halt what she describes as Israel's genocide in Gaza, addressing delegates from 30 countries to explore potential actions against Israel's offensive. Shifting to the occupied West Bank, President Donald Trump's envoy, Mike Huckabee, condemned the killing of 20-year-old Saifullah Musaleh, an American citizen, calling it a criminal act, and urging Israel to investigate settler involvement. Domestically, an Israeli ultra-Orthodox party announced its departure from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government, citing disagreements over the military draft law. Finally, Shahar Segal, a restaurant entrepreneur, has stepped down as spokesman for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation following boycott calls targeting his businesses. India's aviation authority ordered inspections of fuel control switches on certain Boeing planes after an Air India crash in Ahmedabad resulted in 260 fatalities. The preliminary findings indicated that the fuel switches shifted to the cutoff position just before the crash. Following this incident, Air India, along with South Korea, initiated thorough inspections of their Boeing aircraft. Tesla introduced its Model Y in India and opened its inaugural showroom in Mumbai. Immunization coverage in South Asia has reached a new high, with India significantly decreasing its number of zero-dose children by 43%, from 1.6 million in 2023 to 0.9 million in 2024. A high-ranking government minister from the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party said that English speakers in India would soon feel ashamed, highlighting the party's efforts to promote Hindi, which is encountering growing resistance. The threat by US President Donald Trump to impose substantial secondary tariffs on nations trading with Russia has caused concern in India regarding the continuation of its discounted oil purchases from Moscow. Analysts suggest that this issue might complicate bilateral trade negotiations with Washington. Indian police discovered a Russian woman residing in a cave with her 2 children after she remained in the country beyond her visa's validity in her pursuit of spirituality and nature. Internationally, a SpaceX capsule carrying astronauts from India, Poland, Hungary, and the United States safely returned to Earth after completing a 20-day mission. Malaysia is navigating a period of political and economic turbulence, further complicated by international relations. The potential appointment of right-wing influencer Nick Adams as the U.S. ambassador by Donald Trump has sparked controversy among Malaysian politicians. Former ministers and youth leaders alike have voiced strong disapproval, viewing it as a disrespectful gesture. This development coincides with existing anxieties surrounding potential U.S. tariffs, which have already strained relationships with other trading partners, a point emphasized during Secretary of State Marco Rubio's recent visit to Asia. Domestically, Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim is facing increasing pressure. Public dissatisfaction is fueled by the introduction of new taxes, persistent political scandals, and widespread economic uncertainty. These factors have contributed to skepticism regarding the Prime Minister's pledges of a special initiative aimed at benefiting the Malaysian populace. Addressing the growing public outcry and protests from legal professionals demanding greater judicial reform and transparency, the Malaysian government has extended an invitation to the Bar Council to conduct a thorough review of the judicial appointment process. This move aims to alleviate concerns surrounding alleged interference from the executive branch and address the current shortages within the court system. The United States recently deported a group of third-country nationals, characterized as violent criminals, to Eswatini. This action follows a Supreme Court order issued earlier in June. Turning to South Africa, 5 rehabilitated vultures were released into their natural habitat on a mountain range. Meanwhile, in sports, South Africa's rugby player Jasper Wiese received a 4-match ban from World Rugby. The ban resulted from Wiese headbutting Italy's Danilo Fischetti during a test match in GQ Barra. In Spain, anti-immigrant unrest has broken out in Torre Pacheco, a town with a large North African population. Prosecutors have accused the local leader of the anti-immigrant group, Deport the Now, of inciting 4 days of violence. Reports indicate masked men carrying bottles, canes, and other blunt objects marched through the streets during the disturbances. France considered significant budget cuts, amounting to 43.8 billion euros, with Prime Minister François Bayrou suggesting the elimination of Easter Monday and V-Day as public holidays to alleviate national debt and stimulate economic growth. The plan also entailed a freeze on the majority of public expenditures. Simultaneously, France commemorated Bastille Day with traditional displays of military strength, vibrant fireworks, and various public celebrations. Indonesia held a place of honor during the Bastille Day events, with Indonesian military personnel participating in the parade and potential agreements for the procurement of French military hardware on the horizon. As the Cook Islands commemorate 6 decades of self-governance, a political analyst is urging New Zealand to deepen its engagement with the island nation. David Roby suggests New Zealand should bolster its support for Pacific Island neighbors. He also believes New Zealand should challenge nuclear powers in the region. This call highlights the symbolic importance of New Zealand's diplomatic presence in the Cook Islands. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, the beekeeping industry is experiencing internal strife. Apiculture New Zealand, a key advocacy group, is grappling with divisions. These divisions involve various industry stakeholders, charities, and agencies involved in beekeeping. Syria has announced a ceasefire after a spike in sectarian violence. The Swaida region saw clashes between Druze militiamen and Bedouins. Over 100 people died in the fighting. Government forces intervened in Swaida, a Druze city. They aimed to separate the warring groups and secure Druze areas. Simultaneously, Israel launched strikes against Syrian military forces. Israel stated it was protecting the Druze minority. The UK government launched a clandestine operation in 2022 to relocate Afghan allies after a significant data breach. This breach exposed the identities of about 18,000 Afghans who had supported British troops before the 2021 withdrawal. A legal directive was issued to suppress media coverage of a sensitive operation. Canada is currently grappling with severe wildfires in Manitoba, leading to hazardous air quality across major cities like Toronto and Montreal. The smoke has drifted south, triggering air quality alerts in the United States and blanketing skylines with a thick haze. The United States has seen Republican lawmakers lodging complaints with the Canadian ambassador regarding the detrimental effects of the Canadian wildfire smoke on American citizens. This action occurred shortly after these same lawmakers voted for legislation that could potentially increase pollution and worsen the risk of future wildfires. Germany faces internal disputes regarding summer school holiday dates. Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg oppose the national rotation system. They claim their children's labor is essential for the harvest. A recent trend of decreasing driving has reversed. Germans are now driving more. The Constitutional Court dismissed a complaint against the United States' use of Ramstein Air Base. The court affirmed the legality of the base's use in foreign operations. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau faces increasing pressure over his handling of foreign interference allegations. Opposition parties demand a public inquiry into claims that China attempted to influence the 2019 and 2021 federal election. Tensions rise as details emerge about alleged clandestine activities. Canada also grapples with ongoing wildfires in several provinces. Air quality alerts have been issued across the country and in parts of the United States. The government is mobilizing resources to combat the blazes. In the latest from France, President Emmanuel Macron is pushing forward with controversial pension reforms despite widespread public opposition. The reforms raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. This has triggered numerous protests and strikes across the country. France is also preparing to host the 2024 Summer Olympics in Paris. Preparations are underway to ensure security and infrastructure readiness. The government faces challenges in meeting deadlines and managing costs. Meanwhile, in Japan, the government is considering further easing of border controls to boost tourism. The move aims to revitalize the economy after the pandemic. Japan is also strengthening its defense capabilities in response to growing regional security concerns. Increased military spending and cooperation with allies are key priorities. Japan is also grappling with a rapidly aging population and declining birth rate. Policies are being developed to address these demographic challenges. Sudan is facing renewed violence as the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, RSF, are accused of killing approximately 300 individuals in North Kordofan state, starting Saturday. Rights organizations state the attacks targeted areas without clear military importance. The RSF and the Sudanese army have been engaged in intense conflict in this area since April 2023, solidifying it as a crucial battleground in the nation's civil war. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Eswatini recently met with Chinese President Xi Jinping to strengthen ties. He also held talks with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Meanwhile, a Pakistan court has ordered a probe into the rising number of online blasphemy accusations. Shockingly, 767 individuals, mainly young men, are in jail awaiting trial for blasphemy. The European Union, along with key member states such as the UK, France, and Germany, is poised to reimpose sanctions on Iran by August 29, contingent on Tehran's insufficient cooperation regarding its nuclear ambition. These measures will reinstate embargoes previously removed a decade ago. Shifting focus to Yemen, arms dealers with links to Houthi militants are allegedly exploiting social media platforms like X and Meta to facilitate weapons trafficking, including Arms of Us origin. These activities are claimed to violate the platform's stated policies. Meanwhile, in the Asia-Pacific region, the Philippines experienced a magnitude 5.8 earthquake on Luzon Island. The German Research Center for Geosciences reported the quake's depth at 10 kilometers. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.